Hello, everybody. Welcome to SEC Football and Beyond for the unofficial start of the football season. Not the official start, but unofficial start. Yes, it is beginning of SEC Media Days, and we are always thrilled to have Neil McCready and Dan Matthews. Dan is getting ready to head to ACC Media Days. Neil, my friend, has made his way to SEC Media Days, and how are you, Neil? You look a little like you've been through 3 days of media days in a half a day.
No, it was a busy half day for sure. I had a lot to do. Had the Oxford Exxon podcast to record, had to write, and I'm working on a laptop that I don't normally work on, and that has led to a challenge or two this afternoon. But we're okay.
Well, here's what we know. We know that we don't know this yet. By the end of the week, here's what we're going to know. Everybody had a great offseason. It's the best offseason program we've had. Coaches have been the best. So we're going to have 14 teams that are set to win the conference title, 14 teams that are going to surprise everyone. But today we had Dan. First of all, we'll talk a little bit about Greg Sankey in a minute. But Dan Mullen, Ed Orgeron, and Shane Beamer. Let's recap. Dan Mullen, not a whole lot there. Likes his team. Ed Orgeron, everything's great now. He's finally learned how to interview coaches on his staff, so that solved all the problems there. And, you know, as Ed, he's always selling. Always be selling for Ed. Always a recruiter, anytime to the media, what have you. So it's all better now. In case you missed it, we hired the guy that got us to the national championship. The same guy, whatever. No, it's having a little fun there. And then Shane just happy to be there, really excited. So that's kind of not a whole lot of substance there. Today we're going to continue with our team two-a-days with scouting reports on Tennessee and Auburn. But I do want to talk a little bit about what the commissioner had to say. I do think it's interesting, and I heard him in a conversation when the whole debacle, of course, Vanderbilt was in the championship series in baseball, in NC State debacle. We talked about it then. And Neil, I think you might have been out that week because I came back after that and I was talking about, he was emphatic about, he made the comment and he didn't say it, but he kind of almost said it. Let this be a lesson about vaccines and the importance of that. And he kind of hit that home, and I was actually listening to it while I was outside in the yard and doing a little yard work, and I heard that, and it really because it was pretty clear. Well, today, obviously, had the forum and the State of the Union, went through a lot of things and the changes and all that. But for those of you that didn't get it, the most important thing out of it is you're not planning on reschedule games. You know, the situation is a little bit different this year. You play or you're going to forfeit. There are going to be certain parameters from a roster standpoint, but if you don't meet them, we're not rescheduling. And it's kind of what I get, unless that changes.
Yeah.
He's pretty emphatic about pushing. You got a chance, and just so people understand this, Neil, because I know you want to jump in on this. The vaccine issue, and I know this is what the NFL people I've talked with, and I know with Sankey and coaches, it's not that the vaccine's going to prevent you from getting it. But I think without saying it, what he's saying is, you know what? We don't know that half of Vanderbilt's team in the College World Series didn't have it, but it's different testing protocols. So I think they're saying, get your vaccines. There's no excuse because we didn't have a vaccine last year. Get your vaccine, and whether you agree with that politically or not, I'm not. Neil knows me, Dan knows me. I'm not knowledgeable enough on politics or medicine to know. But from a football standpoint, what I'm getting from folks, at least from the SEC and the NFL side, and I'm curious to see what the other commissioners say, is that get vaccinated because that's going to help mitigate the problems with testing, because God forbid you get test positive and you're in contact tracing with 12 players, it could have a problem. It could run our season. I know you probably got some thoughts on that.
I got so many thoughts on this that it makes people.
Just on the football side of it, though.
Well, I know, but it's not just a football thing, right? I mean, yeah, these are football players. I get it, but there's more to their lives than football. I don't. To this day, I'll talk about what he said in a minute. My personal thing is I don't understand why we are testing football teams like this a year later. I don't get it. But anyway, only 6 of the 14 teams are at the threshold. The other 8, I'm told, are not particularly close. There is a lot of vaccine hesitancy among young people. Listen, I live in a house with a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old who are very vaccine hesitant. I relate. I understand. I get it. It's what he said today was that if you're at 85% of your roster is vaccinated, you don't get tested the same way. And what he said today was that he is actually against some of the roster limitations, that he wants it to be more simple than that. You either can play or you can't, and if you're down to a certain number and you elect not to play, essentially that's a forfeit. He was kind of vague as it pertained to the word forfeit, what it means, whether a team would actually forfeit a game and lose the game, or would it just be a no contest? I don't know, but I thought it was the one on a day where I thought Greg Sankey said a lot of profound things. I thought it was one of the more interesting things. He was very, very emphatic about the need for players to get vaccinated. But if you've talked to coaches, and I have, they know that they can't mandate the vaccine. They can encourage the vaccine. They can beg kids to take the vaccine. They can't mandate the vaccine, certainly not at a public institution. And it's very obvious that as we look at some of the numbers that are out there today, where people talk about the cases as it pertains to the Delta variant and all of that, that this is going to continue to be a talking point. This is going to continue to be a point of emphasis. This is something that a lot of people in the media are incredibly obsessed with. And this is not going away. We're going to have another season of this. And I think it's pretty obvious at this point that barring a cooling down of the climate in the next 6 months, 6 weeks politically, I think we're going to see football games get canceled. And teams are going to either have no contest or forfeits. And we'll see how that ultimately impacts the football portion of it. But I think at this point, based on what I'm hearing today and based on what Greg Sankey said today, that seems to be an inevitability at this point, because I just don't know that you're going to be able to look at young people who are hesitant about a vaccine and say, hey, well, look, if you won't get to play football, I think a lot of these young people are thinking about, beyond football as it pertains to their health and whether they want to do it. And then you have some guys that look at it. I know this for a fact. Some guys who look at it and say, I've already had COVID. I had COVID last year. I've got the antibodies. I don't want to take the vaccine. I don't need the vaccine. I didn't get sick then. I'm not going to get sick now. I'm not saying they're right. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying that's how they view it. And it's going to be one of the things that's going to happen unless the FDA comes down and takes off the emergency status on this and makes it formally approved, where that would let it legally be mandated. Without that, if you were to mandate the vaccine inside your program and a young person took the vaccine and developed myocarditis or whatever, you would have some legal issues institutionally, because you forced a vaccine on someone for the sake of football or whatever sport, and that could lead to some problems down the road. So that's something that's a place that these universities just don't want to go. So I think where we're headed is a lot of the same headlines that we had a year ago, where 10 guys on school X are out for Saturday's game against school Y, and that's just going to be part of it.
You're listening to SEC Football and Beyond with Neil McCready over at SEC Media Days. Our executive producer, Dan Matthews, joining us, reminding you to search for, like, and subscribe to the Landry Football Podcast channel on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, so you can listen to us here on SEC Football and Beyond every Monday and Thursday live, and it'll drop Tuesday and Friday mornings on your way to work. We have it for you. As we mentioned, we had Dan Mullen. Lots expected of this Florida team. A lot of talk by him of Emory Jones. LSU, very positive. Shane Beamer. Those are the three that were on tap today in terms of discussion. But as we transition and get into our film room breakdown, our two-a-days continue with Auburn, Tennessee. If you've not followed us to this point, you've missed it. Where have you been? We've kind of broken down a few of them, but we move on to Auburn in Tennessee, and their coaches will be speaking later this week. And obviously, Brian Harsin, much later this week, is going to be, like Shane Beamer, first time in an environment like this where he doesn't quite get this type of activity in the Mountain West. And guys, as I get into Auburn, and I'll give some thoughts here and certainly turn it over. The thing that jumps out at me with Auburn, and certainly you've got to look back to where they've been to kind of see where they might be going. And the whole Gus Malzahn tenure was a very strange one in that it was built in with some really good successes when you look at going up against Nick Saban. I mean, the guy was 3-5 against Nick Saban, and I mean everybody else in the SEC was a combined 3-61. That wasn't the issue head-to-head. In a couple of moments, got some big wins. It's the lack of consistency and certainly the lack of keeping that offense at a high level, which is his baby. And, I thought the successes of that Auburn program the past few years was really more on the defensive side. And certainly when I look at the program, it wasn't that just that Gus struggled. It's just they've lost ground in a program that's recruited pretty well historically, and I thought pretty well under Gus started to slip. When I look at it, and I went back and kind of studied it, well, there's a lot of reasons why he lost their job, mainly due to the offensive ineffectiveness. I've said it before. I think the offensive line coaching, how they coached it, and it was more scheme than just the particular position coach, was the worst orchestrated offensive line in all of Power 5. When I look at why that program slipped, they're losing ground in the recruiting. You forget about Alabama. Again, that's one thing. They're getting beaten in recruiting by Georgia. They're getting beaten in recruiting by Clemson. They're getting beaten in recruiting by Florida. That's got to change. They've got a really good coach, in my opinion, in Brian Harsin. I think you're going to see a much better coach team. I think there is some talent on that team. But it's going to have to require a significant leap in recruiting for them to get back to where their faithful hope they can be. I know what Harsin wants to do and build a physical, disciplined culture type of a program that's built around running game, using tight ends, which I know Chad Morris tried to implement a little bit last year, but they're going to really work the tight ends in the offense a lot more than they did under Gus. They're going to go from an outside zone team to an inside zone team. It was overly simplistic, and I think they're going to be more multiple. Defensively, I thought they were very well coached defensively, and I thought developing talent and utilizing that talent, they have on an elite level. Derek Mason comes in. He'll have some pretty good defensive talent to work with. It'll be interesting to see if he'll simplify things a little bit more. Some of the things that jumped out at me is Derek's always been multiple. Was multiple at Stanford. It was multiple in how he called his defenses at Vanderbilt. Had to be in a couple of those cases. He's probably going to be multiple again. Or is he going to be maybe a little bit more simplistic? Look, the issue here, I think, is going to be, can they be more balanced? and how will they run it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Offense will look different. They're going to play under center more. They're going to play under shotgun. I think the quarterback development or lack thereof and the lack of pocket presence with Bo Nix has a lot to do with that protection and how they protect it and the teaching of pass blocking or the poor job of that. Not knowing where your protection was being set was a big part of the problem. So we'll see at this stage if they can, get anything out of Bo Nix to this point. But it's going to be, when I look at him, it's ironic. I went back and thought about it. The first thing I thought when Brian got the job was, is this the second time that he's replaced Gus Malzahn? And I wanted to make sure he did, because he did replace him at Arkansas State, which, you knew they were both there. But, you like what I've liked and always studied what he's done is out at Boise is the fact that they were always physical. They were always disciplined. They always were sound gap control on defense. They were a good tackling team. Again, I think those are things that they've done well on the defensive side in Auburn's history. Offensively, I think where it's going to change, and I think it's going to really be determined how much they get out of their playmakers. I think Tank Bigsby is a blue-grade player. For those of you that are kind of new, how I grade blue, red, purple, I think Bigsby's blue grade. I think McClain on the defensive side at Will's really good. I think Smoke Monday's really good. I think they've got two offensive linemen that physically, athletically, are red grade players that did not grade out well this year. Proms and Jones. Their Mike Backer's really good. McCready's really good. I think there's some talent left over. How much? Don't know. Kind of breaking them down a little bit. We're going to see how well Nix develops. I don't think that there's a lot there at quarterback in terms of the immediate future. The LSU transfer, to me, is not ready to help them right now in terms of decision making. He's physically gifted, but he was basically not in the top four at LSU for a reason. If they got to go to him, it could be a problem. I do like their ability to develop good quarterback play into the future. I think they'll be good at running back. I like their depth at running back this year. The receiver position is a little bit of a transition as I look at them. Hudson's intriguing. I think the tight end position is going to be fun because I think Bobo likes to run that and Brian likes to run it. So I think that's going to be fun, how much they utilize that, not necessarily in the passing game, but how they can be really effective in the run game and then how to use them a little bit more in the passing game, which they've not utilized in the past. And that really helps a quarterback out too. When you're having to be quick tempo, the protections are not sound, and you have to go vertical, that's not a real good quarterback-friendly system. I think that'll change. Defensively, I think you're going to see 3- and 4-man front mixtures. Like I said, I like the depth and versatility. I didn't mention Pegues. I didn't mention Colby Woodson. Those are guys that should be mentioned on the defensive side of the ball. And I've got more detailed breakdown over at LandryFootball.com. I think they've got 2 red-graded linebackers. I think they've got an elite freshman coming in. I think they've got 2 red-graded or higher players in the secondary coming in. So I think they're going to be more zone coverage, probably on defense, which probably will lead to more big playability. So it'll be interesting to see, how this team shakes out this year. Everybody kind of wants to know. I'm not overly optimistic for this year in the transition year, but I do think there's maybe a little bit more talent than people might think. And I think they have been undercoached to some degree on the offensive side of the ball for some time. And how quickly they can adjust to that will probably determine what type of season they'll have. And I know we'll go into their schedule a little bit and kind of break it down a little bit further.
Yeah, I think Auburn's going to benefit a lot from the freshness of a new coach. Malzahn had been there for a long time. Things were kind of stale. The storylines were repetitive. Whether that was fair or not to Gus, it's really immaterial. I think Harsin comes in. Guys will play hard. It's a new coach. There will be some excitement. They start off with a couple of easy games, Akron at home, Alabama State at home. So he gets a kind of a chance to get a soft beginning. kind of get rolling. They go to Penn State September the 18th. We'll talk about the schedule in a minute, but I think there's a scenario for them that's not that far-fetched where they're unbeaten when they go to LSU in October. So that could create some excitement. I'm big on momentum. I think they have an opportunity to get some momentum. I love the running back. I actually think Nix gets a little more criticism than he deserves sometimes. I thought sometimes they asked him to do things that he's not good at, and it showed. He had a really good freshman year after that first game, and then I thought they kind of started piling on him a little bit more than they should have. I think he's got a chance to be a little bit of a surprise. I'm looking at their FPI. ESPN's got Auburn at between 7 and 8 wins. Got their FPI at 15, a 1% chance of winning the conference. So that tells you that they have a 0% chance of winning out, according to ESPN. But you look at their schedule, and it's like every other SEC schedule. It's interesting. I mentioned those first 3 weeks. They get Georgia State at home in week 4. Then in October, it gets interesting. Their October is full of swing games, in my opinion. 3 out of the 4 games are probably swing games. They get maybe all 4 if you think about the rivalries. They get at LSU October the 2nd. They get Georgia at home October the 9th. They go to Arkansas on October the 16th. They get a weekend off before they host Ole Miss at home on October the 30th. And then in November, they open up at Texas A&M November the 6th. Mississippi State, they're at Jordan-Hare on November the 13th. At South Carolina on the 20th. And then, of course, the Iron Bowl on the 27th. This year, that game is on the Plains there at Jordan-Hare Stadium. So you look at ESPN's FBI predictions. They've got them winning against Akron, against Alabama State, against Georgia State, against Arkansas and Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and South Carolina. So they got to win in 7 games. And then of the games that they have them losing, they have one of those at LSU at 45.2% chance. So ESPN likes Auburn's chances to at least be competitive in that game. Gives them a modicum of a chance at Penn State and versus Georgia. Very little chance at Texas A&M, and only an 18% chance of beating Alabama at home in the season finale.
Well, I think the schedule's pretty clean to understand for Auburn. I think it's pretty obvious who they're not as good as, and they'll lose. And I think there's very little swing games. Now, a lot of people in the South will say, well, Penn State. Well, Penn State's better. I mean, it doesn't mean that Auburn can't win. And Penn State's been an undercoached team. And so Auburn can go in and win that game. But if you're kind of ranking them just in terms of a roster, and that's how I do it, and I look at coaching and everything, Auburn is in that kind of that top 25, whereas Penn State's more of a top 15. And it's at Penn State. So Auburn can win the game, but, I call it the out of 10 theory. I mean, if they play 10 times, I think Penn State wins 6 out of 10. But that's a game that if they win, it looks a lot different. LSU, I don't think they win at LSU. LSU would have to lose it, and that's certainly possible. Georgia's not winnable. I don't think A&M on the road winnable. Alabama's not winnable. So, you look at it, I mean, it's a 7-5, 8-4-ish type of season. Look, there's going to be, I don't think people who follow it, people who are fans, and even a lot of the media will look at and say, in a first-year coach, well, the guy you had there could have won that. There's going to be a change. Okay, and there's a reason why very often that first year, even under Nick Saban, first year at LSU, first year at Alabama, those are extreme opportunities or situations. There's a reason why those are often step backs. And step back in terms of you've got to implement your policy. The issues that they had at Auburn was really from an offensive coaching standpoint, that they were very ineffective because what they did when it worked, it was effective, but it was easy to adjust to. And they had no ability to adjust opposite of that. So it may not look a lot better, and the end result may not be better, but there's a long game there. As I said, If Gus had not lost recruiting ground, you've got Georgia, you got Clemson, you got Auburn recruiting better. That's where they've slipped. So, look, the Gus Malzahn situation, I think, hung on probably longer than people expected. And we'll see how well Brian does. I'm not quite sure Brian's going to be able to recruit at an elite level to be able to get them to where the Auburn administration wants. But that's their decision. They made their decision of what they wanted, how they want it. We'll see if Brian is able to adjust to getting to a recruiting level. In some ways, it's a lot like Florida, right? I mean, it's how good is Florida going to be? Well, Florida's really good. Florida's well coached. But if they don't recruit as well as Georgia, you're going to have to outcoach them to a certain degree that is not going to be as consistent. So Auburn is going to be in the same boat, and they have maybe the toughest thing to deal with in that their fan base has to deal with the team across the state more than anybody. And, but I think as much as it's about Auburn, Alabama, it's about losing ground to Georgia. It's losing ground to, Clemson's not in the league. I get that. But in recruiting, a lot of those guys, they're not at that same level. That's got to change. And I don't know that Brian, if Brian is able to put together a staff going forward that can do that, we shall see. We are talking SEC football and SEC football and beyond. A reminder again to search for, like, and subscribe to the Landry Football Podcast channel on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, so you can listen to us right here every Monday, every Thursday, live, and dropping on Tuesday and Friday, the SEC football and beyond podcast. So that's a look at the Auburn Tigers. Now on to the Tennessee Vols. As this is a program, as I look back at it, you think about it and you study it and you say, okay, wait a minute. Third coach now. If you think about this is the third coaching hire that's inherited. A disaster is maybe a little strong. It's a really bad situation. They just won two winning records in the SEC in the past 13 years. 4 bowls in 10 years. For a program that was obviously great in the 90s, it was Florida, Tennessee, and it was whoever won that game set the stage to who was going to win the East, and who was likely going to be in contention for a national championship, and then there off we went. And Florida's done their thing, and Tennessee's just gotten worse and worse and worse. Administratively, they've had a lot of problems, and it's led to some problems. The program has been in shambles. The thing that concerned me the most was, in watching the tape last year and going back on the film grade notes, was you can look at talent. You can look at certain things, but of all the programs, I thought Vanderbilt did it, and Tennessee, they're the only 2 teams that I could say consistently quit. They didn't play with effort. They didn't play hard. There were culture problems. Pruitt did not do a good job as a head coach from a leadership standpoint. There were problems on the staff that were basically personality issues with Jeremy. More than anything, he was a big reason for the dysfunction. In some cases, you've got a head coach that allows dysfunction and is not able to clean it up. In this case, he was a really big part of the dysfunction. He literally, for all intents and purposes, fired a guy in the middle of a game and took over, coached the defensive line. Defensively, they tried way too much. They tried to be too cute. The real key to being successful, I think, as a coach is you've got to get guys to understand your basics. Think of a system like a tree trunk. You've got to know the tree trunk, and then you can branch out. If you don't know that, obviously in school, if in math, it's hard to go to advanced math if you struggled with the long division and multiplication. They did a poor job of trying to do too much. The offense had no creativity. I thought the attitude and the look of the team was probably as bad as anybody attitude-wise. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a different look Heupel is, of anybody, ran the fastest offense, the fastest between snaps of anybody in the country. They do that to set up big plays. Think a lot of what Ole Miss and Kiffin tries to do, even at a little bit more revved up speed, is what he tries to do. They don't have enough talent, but they're going to work this hard, and they know that they're going to have a hard time trying to creating matchup problems, so they're going to do it with tempo, and they're going to try to outscore you. The defense is going to be bad. It may be the candidate for the worst defense in the league this year. They've got some talent issues, and they've lost 33 guys to the portal, many of them on the defensive side. But in addition to that, everything that they're going to do offensively is going to hurt the defense in terms of their ability to perform well. Now, if you can score some points, it may help you to maybe get to the point where you can be in more games, but they don't have the linebacker talent, and I think those are things that are going to be an issue. They're going to have to get the transfer portal in the next year working in the opposite way for them. Right now, I'm not the whole thing about who's going to be the quarterback. I know that's the story. I'm not crazy about anybody. That is wide open right now because somebody has to win that. Oh, Joe Milton is going to do this. Henderson Hooker. I think it's wide open because I don't think there's any. I think all have some qualities, but nobody's done it. And I can tell you what matters to Josh Heupel. Who can get the team into the right play and avoid the mistakes? Good decision making. The guy that's going to be able to run that offense, because you're going to be running it from the sidelines, you're going to be running it on the field. If you can't make good decisions, it doesn't matter if you have the best arm, you're the most athletic, you're not going to run this offense. So that's going to be won and lost by that. That's the most important thing, decision making, and then certainly accuracy. It was the worst scoring offense in the second half last year in the SEC. They were trailing. They couldn't come from behind. They couldn't do anything. Their net yard per play was the worst in the SEC. It's a real big issue. I thought Bailey of the quarterbacks had the best looking spring in the tape I looked at. But again, getting a good feel for it, I do think that Hooker has some experience playing college ball, different system. But yet, we'll see how and Milton has got a little experience and has some of the qualities. I think it's wide open. I think it's going to come down to those guys. Caden Salter, if you haven't followed it and gotten the problem off the field about, a month and a half ago, he's heading to Liberty with the Hugh Freeze. They're going to miss Gray and Chandler at receiver. And I do think there's potential with Evans. I tell you, D. Beckwith, as I studied, they're going to need to get him on the field as an H-back type of guy. He's a big running back that's really more of a guy that can work close to the formation and help them, and that's going to be really key. The biggest change moving forward is how they coach the receivers, and so you're going to see them play fast, even though they may not be overly talented. It may go from being the worst coach position on the team to the best. We'll see how much better it can be. So we'll see how this plays out. The Mississippi State transfer, Peyton, the JUCO kid, Clay, that's coming in, I like a lot. It's got some ability. I think the offensive line, it underachieved. I think Mays is a good player. I think there are a couple of good players on the team. When I look at the blue-gray players, they're none. Cade Mays is a red-grade player. Teron Flowers on defense and Paxton Brooks, the punter, are red-grade players in my mind. I think there are several. I think Velus Jones is a red-grade player, particularly as a returner. But there's not enough of those guys. They're thin at linebackers, I mentioned. They've got some experience on the defensive line, some pass rush with Byron Young, but the offensive pace is going to hurt them. I think they're going to have a hard time generating consistent rush. I think there's actually decent skill in the secondary, relatively speaking. It's going to be ultra-fast tempo. It's going to be fun. It's going to look a little different. I don't know how effective it's going to be. We'll see. It's a big rebuild here. I don't know that this is going to be a long-term fit because Tennessee, again, their old fan base, and I know we've talked about it. They haven't won in a long time, but they have won. It's not like it's been the 50s or 60s. 90s, I guess, to me, is not that long ago. It is, I know, but it doesn't feel that long ago. But that fan base is big on defense, playing good defense. And just some of the old guard is, General Neyland, we went through a season. I just think they are in for it may be fun for a while. When they see that defense struggle, they're going to, and this is not going to be a one-year struggle. This defense will never be good as long as Josh Heupel's there. I think that's going to be a problem for his tenure there, and I think the fan base is going to say, what I can tell you right now, our defense is not good enough to be championship level. You're right, and it won't be. And I don't think this is going to be a great tenure for Josh Heupel.
Dan, Chris gets mad at me when I say Tennessee hadn't won in a while, and then he says it hasn't been a while, and then it has.
90s is not that long to me. 1990s, that feels like not too long for me. That's my age. Quit making fun of my age. I do the best I can.
No. I mean, I'm there joining you is because my little cousin this weekend, I think it was Red Hot Chili Peppers, and they said classic rock. I said, don't you dare. Don't you dare. I'm not there yet. Don't you dare do that to me.
I thought you were talking Mexican food, so that just tells me how little I know. 90s is not that long ago. Hell, 70s is not that long ago. But I realize
Bill
a lot of our
Clinton
listeners.
was the president the last time they won.
I know. He's still alive, isn't he? Isn't Bill still alive?
Bill is still alive, but
okay. I mean, Jimmy Carter's still alive. I think
we've been through 8 years of Bush, 8 years of Obama, 4 years of Trump, and 6 months of Biden since the last time they won. It's been a minute.
What's your point?
Well, I will tell you this. I talked to some people about Tennessee, and some people, obviously knowing I cover Ole Miss, they're like, I think Tennessee's going to be a lot like Ole Miss last year. And so I said, how so? And like, well, they're going to score a lot of points. They're going to go fast. Defensively, they're going to struggle. And I said, does Matt Corral play for Tennessee? And no, they got some quarterback issues. And I said, so wait a minute. So you have quarterback issues and a bad defense, and you're going to try to go fast. That's not going to work. Now, I will tell you this, Chris. Their schedule, they've got a chance at some wins. So they open with Bowling Green at home Thursday, September the 2nd. They get Pittsburgh at home.
Hold on. That's an upset if they beat Pittsburgh. I'm just telling you, and it's winnable.
Yeah,
but I mean, if you're looking at Tennessee, they're like a 65 to 75. Where Pitt's like a top 40. Go ahead. I'm just because most people are going to say they're going to beat Pitt.
I was going to tell you that ESPN FPI has Pittsburgh at 51.9% chance win for Tennessee. So it's basically a coin toss. Tennessee Tech is September the 18th. Then they get the road. They go to Florida to open SEC play, at Missouri on October the 2nd. They come home October the 9th for South Carolina and Ole Miss on October the 16th. They go to Alabama October the 23rd. Then they get a chance to lick their wounds a little bit. November for them opens at Kentucky November the 6th. They get Georgia at home November the 13th. My buddy Kane Womack in South Alabama go to Knoxville on November the 20th. And then finish at home November the 27th against the Vanderbilt Commodores. So ESPN's got them winning against Bowling Green, Pittsburgh, Tennessee Tech, South Carolina, South Alabama, and Vanderbilt. So 6-6 for the Vols. But one of those games, obviously, Pittsburgh's 51.9%. Their next closest win, if you will, ESPN gives them a 41.8% chance against Ole Miss, a 41.4% chance against Kentucky, and a 40.9% chance against Missouri.
Yeah, I think 5-7, 6-6, and I think the Pitt game is the swing one. Maybe their tempo can surprise somebody, but they can lose to just about anybody, with the exception of Tennessee Tech and Bowling Green. They could in South Alabama. To me, I think it's pretty clear. I think that's what it is there. I don't think that they're any better than that. could they just out-tempo and score some points and force Kentucky to play left-handed and pull an upset? Yeah, it could happen. If it does, then that's a huge, huge win. But you know what? You just get the feeling from those folks, and God love them, that they expect to beat Kentucky. Like this year, they expect to beat Ole Miss. They expect to beat Missouri. They expect to beat Pitt. I don't think there's a sense of reality there, but we shall see.
Ryan Marshall says Bill Clinton is still alive because he hasn't turned on Hillary. That's funny.
Okay.
I know we're going to talk some other things. Before we do, I want to tell you this show brought to you by Blue Sky. Blue Sky believes in being fast, fresh, and friendly. Through the thoughtful layout and cleanliness of their stores, Blue Sky hopes to provide customers with a fast and easy buying experience. From services to products, Blue Sky plans to keep things fresh and always provide the freshest flavors of their brand name products and the best services available. They even bring in some of the newest products on the market to their stores to provide an even better customer experience. A smile can say it all, and at Blue Sky, they want to show their customers that they care about them and the shopping experience, so they'll always strive to improve their efforts to accomplish exactly that. So please check out Blue Sky today at any one of their 48 store locations across the Southeast.
And that's a look at the Tennessee Vols. A reminder coming up next on this Thursday show, Friday morning drop. We'll have a breakdown of the Ole Miss Rebels, the Missouri Tigers, as we kind of march on and get you through. Folks, we're going to do it, and people wondering, hey, we'll work our way, get through all these. We'll kind of look at the divisions and break it down, and we'll talk about some national teams. As folks, countdown is on to the start of the season. Let's go beyond for some national college football thoughts, brought to you by LandryFootball.com, cheap plug there, but we've got a lot of information. Hey, it was a big weekend in recruiting. No surprise that Oregon comes with a really good 4-star, or Clemson, or Oklahoma. Big gets there. But how about this? Attaboy, verbal commitments, 4-star verbal commitments for Northwestern and Iowa State. A really good linebacker for Pat Fitzgerald's coming in. Good edge rusher, guy that runs track in the 11.5. Anto Saka is a really good kid, smart kid. He's 6'2", 230, good going to. But he's from Loyola, Blakefield High School there locally. Great get for them. They don't get a lot of 4-star guys, so attaboy there. And Iowa State, oh yeah, you win, you become a developmental program, you get ranked in the top 10. You get a commitment from a 4-star receiver, Greg Gaines, 6'2", 185. Says, likes the culture, likes the program. These kids, they think that Iowa State's always been a power. That's about how much they know. They're just saying 90s. They could be top 90s in Tennessee. They think in 1890s. They don't know the difference. Those kids think, Iowa State, what a great program, what a great culture. He called it a 5-star culture. So Greg Gaines, congratulations to him as he's excited about joining the Iowa State Cyclones. Little NFL tidbit. So, we've talked a little bit about it, and I know publicly it's been very quiet on the Deshaun Watson front. But behind the scenes in some football folks, there's some teams that are very much interested, provided the whole legal issues get resolved. Now, they won't, come out and say any of this. They won't even get this stuff leaked out. But there's some teams that are interested that if it, here's the situation as I gather it. I don't see any way anything's going to be resolved other than him having to sit out this season. But the NFL and Houston police are dealing with that, and we're going to go to that to see what happens there. And then the departure from the Texans is going to happen only once we can get to that point. So we'll see what his status is, what they can trade. And obviously they can't trade him now on the suspended list. So, but I will keep an eye out. Miami, Philadelphia are two teams I do know. They didn't tell me this. I do know, though, that they have some interest if things play out. So let's keep that in mind. So that's a look there of some latest news around the NFL college football. Keep in mind, you can get more of information like that, some nuggets around the NFL and the NFL Notebook every day on LandryFootball.com, as well as college information. A lot more. You want to know some of the details and some of the recruiting news coming here now. We're going to get into, guys, as you know, practices are going to be starting before you know it, and what's going on in practices, injuries and whatnot, and all the stuff. And God help me if I got to talk a lot about the COVID stuff, but as we talked about at the top, we may have some of that as well that factors in. And I think what's going to be interesting around the country, guys, as we kind of wrap it up for today, is how the other conferences are going to deal with that. No, the ACC, Big 12, and I thought Bob Bowlesby did a good job last week in the Big 12 media day, kind of talking about where their stance is. Going to be real interesting to see with a new commissioner in the Pac-12, Kevin Warren, and what a debacle it was in the Big Ten last year, how they're going to answer the whole COVID issue and what their stance is, what their philosophy is going to be. New guy in the ACC, John Swofford's not there. How's he going to deal with it? I think I kind of have an idea of where it's going to be in the ACC, but I'm very curious to see Pac-12, Big Ten, how that's going to play out. We've got intersectional games. We've got Ohio State, Oregon. We've got UCLA, LSU. We've got Miami, Alabama. So it's going to have an effect. As obviously remind folks that we went conference games and we played it that way. This year we're going to go full bore, and so the whole bubble thing, all that is going to be a lot more difficult process to handle. Guys, Neil, any thoughts? What's on your agenda the rest of the media days there? It's got your eye open. I know you got Lane Kiffin coming up, but any other than that?
Well, tomorrow is going to be, for me, really Ole Miss centric. I've got Lane Kiffin, Matt Corral, Jalen Jones, kind of throughout the day. I don't even know who else goes tomorrow. I'll be pretty much locked in on Ole Miss. It's our first in-person access with Kiffin since a real brief appearance in Oxford in, I guess that was early June. So it's the first time I've talked to him in person in a good bit. First time I've talked to Matt Corral in person since the end of last season. So, a lot to talk about with Matt. Expectations for him are really high. And then, Jalen Jones, I'm sure we'll talk a lot about their defense. And then I guess as the week goes on, I'll get back to some other big picture stuff, but tomorrow for me will be really heavy on Ole Miss.
Hey, Dan, what's going on in the mailbag? I kind of forgot that, and I don't want to do that. I invite everybody always to join us in the chat room. What are the people talking about? What do they want to know?
All right, so we got a couple in here, and I kind of, before we get there, want to play off a couple of storylines that we heard yesterday at SEC Media Days, where you had LSU, Florida, and South Carolina go. Let's tackle 2 out of 3 here. Number one, LSU. A lot of pressure, you could say, even a couple of years removed from a national championship for Ed Orgeron there. So this is the scenario that I want to lay out. This is Dan Matthews in the chat right here. Let's lay out a scenario that the opening weekend of the 2021 season, Billy Napier and the Louisiana Raging Cajuns go to Austin and beat Texas in Austin. That same weekend, LSU has a less than stellar performance. Let's just say that. They don't lose, but they come out of it saying, wow, very disappointing to not win that game at UCLA a lot more than they did. Or if UCLA pulls off the upset, are we starting to hear rumblings around Coach O there in Baton Rouge?
Yeah, I think there's always frustration. So the success of the season or lack thereof is gonna take it one way or the other. And really, even if they're winning, and as you said, maybe they're not winning impressively enough, it could be an issue. Now, so I'm gonna surmise that you're kind of hinting towards Billy Napier doing well and and Ed not, as to it could be a possibility that Billy would be the next coach there. I can tell you, the way it works politically, the ULL coach is not going to get it at LSU. It's not that he shouldn't. I think he'd have been a good fit at South Carolina. But I just think that it's not going to be what, if there's an opening at LSU, Scott Woodard's is going to aim high. He's the first guy he's going to call. He's going to make Jimbo Fisher turn him down. Now, if an opening happens in the next 2 years, there's no chance that Jimbo would even, other than a cursory. Now, the only chance that Jimbo would consider it is if 2 or 3 years down the road, he hasn't won, people are saying, well, he hadn't won a national title at A&M, then, and so if Ed is still there and the opening is at that point, I think with the relationship that Scott has with Jimbo, he can say, look, Ed Orgeron and Les Miles both won national championships here. You can come in and do and build upon what Nick Saban started, and you can be here, long and build something that's great and sustainable over time. Timing's everything. It's just going to be the timing's going to be everything. I just don't know that Billy Napier is as good as he is. That's not going to fly with a lot of their fan base, and certainly not with the politicals that are involved in it. But there would be a lot of conversation. There would be a lot of people that would be a lot of, is here, there, there would be a lot of that. You could make the case that Billy has done a really good job, and there's some people that are LSU fans that would say that Ed would be a better fit at a place like Louisiana Lafayette than LSU. There's some people that actually think that.
Yeah, this works too, Dan. I mean, if LSU gets off to a hot start and looks really good, they're going to want to hang on to Ed Orgeron and keep rolling. Just a year ago, he was big time. If they look sloppy, if they look undisciplined, if they lose games that they aren't supposed to win, somebody needs to be a scapegoat for a Title IX thing, and he would be an easy one.
Yeah, it's definitely a situation that continues to play on down there in Baton Rouge for sure. One more from yesterday before we get to a couple of the mailbag questions. That is Florida. They came through the car wash there in Hoover, Alabama. And one of the topics of conversation was the defense. Can you necessarily see an opportunity for Florida? Now, I don't want to take away too many of the pearls that we're going to give away once we do the team preview for the Gators, but can we see a pretty marked improvement this year from that Florida defense that really was a pretty huge liability for them in 2020?
I think we'll see an improvement, marked improvement. I'm not quite sure I'm ready to go there yet. Look, people talk about the confusion. They did too much. No, they were too simple last year. They couldn't run the majority of what they tried to do defensively. They just didn't have it. They didn't have typical Florida talent. Now, their secondaries are all loaded, but I thought that up front, they couldn't do a lot of what they like to do. They gave up 6.1 yards per play, and it was a lot of, they had to gamble a lot and sometimes be a little too simple. And look, everybody say, what did everybody say? Simplify the defense, simplify the defense. When you simplify the defense, you become easier to attack. So, yeah, sometimes you have to simplify it, because if you can't run it right, it's better to do something simple and be going full speed doing it right. They were in a mess, and I do think they feel a little bit better about it. Look, Todd's coached better than he did last year, but that was more than just bad play calling. That was a combination of a bad defense, and it's not always bad play calls on game day. It's how you design it. And I think they may run the football a little bit more. They didn't help out the defense because they felt like they need to win it with the offense. I think more running this year is going to help the defense out.
Yeah, I'll let Chris's answer stand there. He knows that a lot better than I do.
All right, so let's get right to the mailbag, as we have a usual here because, well, Grind asks good questions. Grind asking in the show today, Bo Pelini, starting off with a statement, Bo Pelini went 9-4 every year at Nebraska and was good but not great, so Nebraska fans wanted more. Now they'll do anything for a 9-win season there in Lincoln. Will Gus be to Auburn what Bo Pelini was to Nebraska? Gus, of course, being Gus Malzahn.
Well, look, it's easy to go and say, well, Nebraska should have left well enough alone. I'd say not forget Bo Pelini, Frank Solich, who just retired, and that was more Nebraska in style. And the difference is there are a lot of changes. Never should have gotten rid of Philip Fulmer at Tennessee. No, there's a time where it's not working, and because you make bad hires at Tennessee, Nebraska, whatever, it doesn't mean that you should have let the other guy who was not doing a very good job stay in it right away. Philip had let the program at Tennessee erode. Did it get worse? Yeah. Why? Not because you didn't keep him, it's because you didn't do a good job hiring. When I talk about schools with resources and potential and historical value, you can still screw it up if you don't hire the right people and put it in place. So, no, you may have that. You may look at that. I think you probably always see a coach in looking back as a lot better. I saw that at LSU with Charlie McClendon, 17 years. Couldn't beat the Bear. Get rid of him and fire him. You know, he's looked at a lot better. They named the practice facility after him. I mean, wasn't a great coach, but he was a really good one. I think you'll look at Gus in a very positive way if you're at Auburn. But at some point, you move on. Mark Richt, I mean, just, really good job, and we certainly give our best to him in his battle and his health issues. But at some point, you got to move on. But moving on comes with a risk. You better get it right. And boy, God help you if you get it wrong once, twice, 3 times, because every time you get worse. It's a risk you take, but it's a risk you have to move on, because if you don't, who's to say that the deterioration wouldn't have continued with that guy that you had that you liked so much down the road?
Yeah, that storyline at Auburn was getting old, too. They just beat up Gus all the time. How much of it was because Nick Saban's across the state? How much of it was because of what Kirby Smart's done at Georgia? I don't know. Gus had some big wins. He beat Alabama a good bit, I mean, considering relative to everybody else. But that fan base was kind of done. And when it gets stale and you're not winning the way that a fan base expects you to win, whether those expectations are realistic or not, you do have to at some point start thinking about hitting a reset button. And like, there's a gamble to that. I mean, is Brian Harsin going to walk in and turn Auburn into a top 5 program? I don't know. He might not. If he doesn't, the next guy you replace, is he guaranteed to do it? No, you guys know my attitude on this. Just because you were once dominant doesn't mean you're going to be dominant again. Now, I do think Auburn is a program that has a ton of resources, a phenomenal fan base. Everybody wants it. They pull in the same direction quite a bit. And so I think you'll be hard-pressed to not be able to win at Auburn, but I do think it's time. You could stick with Gus, right? And you could do this another year. And then at the end, but it appeared to finally be catching up with them in recruiting.
And no doubt. And real quick, keep in mind that we talk about when you compare with this and that and this program, that program, you can be really good. You can recruit really well. But how are you relative to your school? I was doing something and looking at Wisconsin recently. And we talked about Mississippi State recently and other programs that are recruiting like 16th, 20th in the country. That'll get you the number 1 recruiting class in the Big Ten West. That'll put you 6th or 7th in the SEC West. Everything's relative. So the expectation's greater at Auburn, and, it's going to make it difficult for Brian or whoever else comes in to achieve what is being achieved right now at Alabama, maybe A&M, depending on what LSU. It's a tough climb.
You bringing up Charlie McClendon, too, takes me back to the old hat that he used to wear, the old trucker hat right there. And my dad,
the little mesh hat.
I lifted it from him when I was in high school, because that's back when trucker mesh hats were making their return. And so I need to find where that hat is. It's got to be somewhere. But I always remember whenever I see pictures of Charlie McClendon, he's always wearing that same hat. Real quick.
Great guy.
Let's get you out of here on this one. Killa Cam wants to know. Question is, can Brian Harsin, flip the recruiting in a year like Mike Norvell seems to have had at FSU?
Well, FSU's done a good job. Let's see how they finish. Florida State's not going to finish in the top 5 nationally recruiting, okay, where they are now. They're going to finish, though, probably top 15. It's my guess, based on it. So they've done a really good job. But again, who they're recruiting against relative to who they're playing. I don't know. The issue is just what I said. If you're at Florida State, right now, North Carolina's recruiting a little bit better than you are. Miami's kind of where you are. You can get into that upper echelon. You can't be Clemson level maybe, but you can be a contender for the second best in that league. Again, if you're at Auburn and you're not recruiting at the same level as Georgia or Florida or Alabama or A&M or LSU, where do you think that puts you? So you can quote unquote flip it around. What do you consider flipping it around? If it's a top 15 class, if it's an 8 to 10 class, that's a good class, 8 to 10 nationally. It'll put you behind Alabama, LSU, Georgia, A&M, maybe Florida. So that's going to put you 5th or 6th in the SEC. Where is that going to put you in the standings? Unless you upcoach them, it's going to put you about the same area. It's not rocket science.
I've seen Auburn recruit at a really high level before, Dan. Really high level.
Yeah, top 5, recruit top 5, you can do it. That's what you got to do. Florida can recruit top 5 and Georgia can recruit top 5.
Yeah, I mean, when you put
they're not doing it right now, and Georgia's doing a better job, and that's the reason why it is where it is.
It's all about resources, Christopher. All about resources and whether you're committed to dedicating the resources necessary.
Well, I mean, that's supposedly, too, the reason why Jimbo is no longer at FSU is because that's what they said.
That's right. That's exactly right.
No.
He's got better resources. And A&M's doesn't have that tradition. Neither does Oregon. But they have the look of a program that can do it. And so that's the key.
And that's been the thing, too, is, from my ties back to Texas, is that's what they always said, Aggie fans, was we've got the facilities, we got the stadium, we got the money. Why aren't we getting the wins? So that's something that's always been a little frustrating for them.
Got to get it all channeling in the same direction.
Yeah, no, you do. And then the other part of it as well is you mentioned Clemson. The funny thing is the people go and look at the 24/7 rankings or Rivals or whoever you get your rankings from. They're never that high. It seems like what Dabo and his staff do, they pick the top of the top and say, we're making those guys our priority and we're getting those guys. So if they get those guys, then they say, okay, we can be fine signing 15, and that's all we need for this year's class.
But they're clearly the best in the ACC, and that's the difference. And the SEC, why is Auburn slipped? Because they're not recruiting top 5. And is Florida going to catch Georgia? Depends. Can they recruit top 5? I mean, there's only 5 spots. If you're going to be top 5, if you're truly going to recruit and develop, that's always the challenge. And you got more teams in the SEC that does it, and that's why it's difficult. It's 2 ways you get better. You get your players better, or you get better players. And the programs that can do that the best, consistently, and you have a program that has patience, that's the key to building something that's sustainable.
Well, that's just the hat for me, guys.
All right, guys. Hey, great show. Appreciate it. I'm working on the road here at SEC Media Day. A reminder again, search for, like, and subscribe to the Landry Football Podcast channel on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, so you can listen to us here on SEC Football and beyond. For Neil, for Dan, I'm Chris Landry. Make sure that you join us again Friday morning. The show will drop. I'll be with you on Thursday to talk to you a little bit live, but we're going to break down Ole Miss and Missouri for you Friday morning. Check that out right here on SEC Football and beyond. Take care, everybody.